You would agree that the Islamic Republic of Iran is well known to detain, torture, even kill political dissidents, including evangelical Christians, would you not?
Yes, Senator, they have done that. Yes.
And last week, the Iranian American Legal Defense Fund filed a lawsuit alleging that the Trump administration has adopted a policy of collaborating with the Islamic Republic of Iran to provide details about asylum applicants. This is the United States government providing information regularly and frequently to the Iranian government about Iranian nationals who are seeking asylum here in the United States. These are declarations made under oath before the court about high officials stationed here with Iran getting information from the United States government, and then the American government deporting hundreds of individuals, including evangelical Christians, back to Iran, where they face torture, imprisonment, potential death. Were you or the Department of Justice consulted about this policy?
Well, that's not our policy, Senator. We would never send somebody home to be tortured. That's not what the American people would expect of us. That's certainly not what President Trump does. So I'm not familiar with the lawsuit you're talking about, but there's no such policy.
Will you commit to investigate these allegations?
I know nothing about the lawsuit. I will, when you say commit to investigate allegations, we don't do that. But certainly if the lawsuit needs to be answered and part of that includes investigation, absolutely.
Well, you do investigate allegations of illegality. This policy would clearly be not only illegal, but morally repugnant, would it not? You agreed with me that it should not be the policy of the United States to do it.
But in your question, you're suggesting there is such a policy. I'm telling you there is no such policy.
Well, if there is no such policy, then I presume you would investigate it.
When I see the lawsuit, I'm just not familiar with it. We will, of course, do what's appropriate.
But you'd agree with me that it would be wrong.
That it would be wrong, meaning it would be wrong to send somebody home to be tortured, yes.
Let me ask you about allegations in connection with David Gentilli. I think we talked about these allegations when you visited me. Thank you for coming to my office. In May of 2025, David Gentilli was sentenced to 7 years in prison for his role in an almost $1.8 billion Ponzi-like scheme that defrauded over 10,000 investors, many of them middle-class retirees, of their hard-earned savings, and he was imprisoned. He boasted to fellow inmates and others that he was going to be released because he paid $2.5 million for clemency. Evidence collected by the Eastern District of New York supported those allegations and reportedly also included statements by Father Frank Mann that he spoke to the president about David Gentilli. The Eastern District of New York was investigating these allegations and reportedly received a call from one of your top deputies instructing them about the concerns of the Department of Justice. The investigation was stopped by the Eastern District of New York. I wrote to you on June 23rd and United States Attorney Joseph Nacella about these allegations, that an investigation into this impropriety was shut down at the request of your office. Did you have any involvement or knowledge about the commutation of Mr. Gentilli's sentence?
President Trump, as I've said a couple times today, has full authority to pardon or commute anybody convicted of federal crime.
That's not my question.
So I'm answering your question, Senator.
Did you
I'm answering your question. What my communications with President Trump, I will not talk about. He does not, nor should he. He has no obligation to discuss pardon or commutation decisions with me, and he has not. As far as the what you just suggested about an investigation, I believe you're referring to a news article that was the result of apparent leaks, and I would caution that there's falsehoods in those news articles.
I'm asking you whether you had any involvement in commuting that sentence or in stopping the investigation into the allegations of impropriety, possibly payment to Father Frank Mann.
And I answered the first question, but when you say stopping an investigation, there's an assumption built into your question that I will not concede. We will not talk about whether investigations exist or don't exist, and certainly some leak about something that we supposedly did doesn't warrant an answer either.
There was an investigation, correct?
That's my whole point in saying is that there's an assumption baked into your question that I don't think is true, meaning that we cannot comment on even the existence of investigations
You've
like that.
commented this morning to Republican colleagues about several investigations.
No, I haven't.
Well, you commented in response to the chairman about the FISA investigation,
About the what? Excuse me?
the investigation that he asked you about.
So, Senator, my point is that you're asking me questions about a news article, the source of which was apparently leaks. It would be inappropriate for me as the acting attorney general to comment on such leaks or news articles that you're referencing. But when it
Well,
goes
I accept that you're not going to answer my question, but I think there is a need for the Inspector General to look into the investigation that was apparently, according to these articles and other information, stopped as a result of your intervention. Let me move on. In 2017, more than 10,000 9/11 victims filed suit against the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. That lawsuit is heading to trial. Information was promised by President Trump in September of 2019. That information has not been provided. Will you commit to meet with those families and provide the information they need for their lawsuit?
folks from my office have met with the representatives of those families. We will commit to continuing to have communications, of course.
And provide the information they're seeking?
Well, you're saying, I don't know what the information is you're talking about, so obviously I can't just commit to providing the information.
Well, let's talk about other information. Information about the Epstein abuses. Your predecessor apologized to the Epstein survivors with good reason, because as you've said today, mistakes were made. I'm asking you today, with Epstein survivors in this room, to apologize to them.
Well, so my heart breaks for every victim of any sexual crime, whether it's involving Mr. Epstein or somebody else. And so if you're asking me to apologize that this happened to them, of course, absolutely. This is a horrible thing, which is why this Department of Justice, this administration is focused very heavily on going after these predators. And so, yes, of course, that's part of my job as being empathetic to the victims of crime.
Will you apologize to them for the mishandling and mistakes that were made by the United States Department of Justice?
I will absolutely say that any mistake that we made should not have been made. And I very much, I can answer the question, or you can just interrupt me, Senator, but I am answering your question. I very much, and I have said this to anybody that asks and publicly before, any mistake that was made is not appropriate. And so, yes, I am sorry that in about 1% of the documents, mistakes were made. But what I will say on top of that is we put tons of resources to rectifying those mistakes immediately, including pulling down documents within minutes of being informed that there were mistakes, potential mistakes made, and working 24/7 to rectify any mistakes. And that's what I would expect the victims would want us to do, and their counsel and this body as well.
And you would agree with me, wouldn't you, that you can well meet with any of the survivors or victims with their counsel present? You said you can't meet with them, but you could meet with them if they're
I never
counsel
said
with
I
them.
can't meet with them. I said if they were represented, I had to meet through counsel. But of course, I can meet with them. I'm the acting attorney general of the United States, so yes, I can. I very strongly believe that if for these victims to tell their stories and the evidence that they have, they should meet like any victim of a crime with the FBI or a law enforcement agent, and that we will do everything we can to prosecute if we can.
The judge in Florida referred your misconduct. She concluded that there was misconduct and misrepresentation and improper purpose in that legal action to the Bar of New York for potential discipline, including losing your law license. I know you disagree with the result of the ruling. Has that kind of referral ever happened by a federal judge for an attorney general of the United States?
Can you
I
get
don't know, but I'll tell you something. That judge never asked us to respond. She never gave us an opportunity to respond to anything. And she didn't refer me. She just asked that a copy of the order be provided to the New York Bar, because there are several activist groups that have filed complaints against me. So listen, as I've said earlier, I think anybody on this committee, especially the lawyers that have practiced, can read that opinion and reach their own conclusions. But I very much disagree with the judge's insinuations about me. And we're going to do what we can to make that right.
One last question. Would you agree with me that agents of the United States should not fire into cars unless fire their weapons into cars unless there is an imminent threat?
give a short answer to that?
There's a well-established standard as to when an agent can discharge their firearm, and I think that's something that should be followed in every case.
And that includes not firing weapons into cars.
Mr. Chair.
Do you want to respond to?
I mean, there's not really a response. It requires federal agents to follow the rules.
Then let's move on. Before I call on.
If that made your blood boil, you need to stay for what's next. Because this is only the first crack in the story. A man who stole $1. $8 billion from 10,000 working Americans. Teachers, veterans, retirees who trusted him with their life savings, served 12 days. 12. Then the sentence vanished. The restitution vanished. And the federal investigators who tried to find out why got a phone call telling them to stand down. And the man now asking you to trust him with the entire Justice Department just sat in that chair and refused to say one honest word about it. This is exactly the kind of story that gets buried if you don't help push it into the light. Forward Brief exists because accountability journalism doesn't happen by accident. It happens because people like you refuse to look away. So here's what I need from you right now, before the next clip even starts. Hit subscribe. Not later. Now. Every subscriber tells the algorithm this story matters. And that's how it reaches the next person who needs to see it. Hit like on this video. It takes 1 second, and it's the single biggest factor in whether this gets recommended to someone who's never heard Todd Blanche's name. And share this. Send it to one person right now. Text it to a friend, drop it in a group chat, post it. Corruption survives on silence, and every share is one more crack in that silence. This channel is built on the belief that the people deserve to see exactly what their government does when it thinks no one's watching. Stick around, because it gets worse. What you just watched is not a hypothetical. It is an active federal lawsuit filed in the U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia, and the details are worse than Blumenthal even had time to lay out on camera. The Iranian American Legal Defense Fund and Public Citizen Litigation Group allege that since March of 2025, U.S. immigration officials have been meeting monthly with representatives of the Iranian government to hand over immigration files, not on criminals, not on threats, but on Iranian nationals seeking asylum in the United States. According to the complaint, Iran's interest section requested a list of detained Iranian nationals the U.S. wanted to deport, and American officials handed over roughly 150 names. Read that again. The government whose torture chambers and execution rooms Todd Blanche just admitted exist on camera. That same government was allegedly handed a list of the very people trying to escape it. The lawsuit's plaintiffs aren't abstractions. They are pro-democracy protesters. They are religious minorities. They are LGBTQ Iranians who would face imprisonment or death if forced back. More than 100 people have already been deported to Iran under this administration, and the lawsuit alleges another mass deportation flight was being organized in the weeks after it was filed. Federal regulations and the Convention Against Torture both explicitly prohibit sharing asylum information with the country an applicant is fleeing. That is not a gray area. That is not a policy dispute. That is the law, and the law exists precisely to prevent what this lawsuit alleges is already happening. And when a sitting United States Senator asked the man who wants to run the entire Department of Justice whether he would commit to investigating it, Todd Blanche did not say yes. He did not say no. He said he wasn't familiar with the lawsuit about a policy his own department stands accused of running for over a year. If confirmed, this is the man who decides whether that investigation ever happens at all. Keep that in mind, because the accountability doesn't stop with immigration. It goes straight to the Attorney General's own law license. Here is what actually happened in that hearing room. A man asking the Senate to make him the top law enforcement officer in the United States could not bring himself to say a plain, unqualified apology to the survivors of Jeffrey Epstein. He said he was sorry, that in about 1% of the documents, mistakes were made, turning victims of a sexual predator into a rounding error, a documents management footnote. And that same man, days before this hearing, was referred by a sitting federal judge to the New York bar for potential disbarment. Judge Kathleen Williams didn't mince words. She concluded that the settlement Blanche engineered between the Justice Department, the IRS, and Donald Trump's family was a deliberate attempt to manipulate the judicial process, to use the court's own legitimacy to launder a deal that could have cost American taxpayers up to $650 million. She referred him to the same attorney grievance committee that holds the law license he needs to practice law anywhere in this country. His defense in that hearing room was not to answer for the substance. It was to say the judge never asked him to respond, as if due process, not the underlying conduct, was the injury here. Layer that on top of a $2.5 million clemency-for-cash scandal his own department's prosecutors were told to stand down on. Layer it on top of a lawsuit alleging his government is handing Iran the names of the people fleeing its torture chambers. This is not a pattern of isolated mistakes. This is a nominee who, question after question, chose evasive language over accountability. I will not concede. That's not my question to answer. I'm not familiar when the people he serves deserve the truth. The Senate will decide in the coming weeks whether this is the man who leads the Department of Justice. Based on what you just watched, ask yourself one question. If he won't give straight answers to elected senators in a public hearing room, what happens when no one's watching at all?